Hello there students, welcome to Educate. In this video we'll be looking at the principles of neutralization titrations. We are particularly looking at the solutions as well as the indicators for acid-base titrations. Okay, so I just want to remind you, why do we even carry out titrations? First of all, we have got two types of solution that we can talk about first. We have got a standard solution as well as an analyte. So we've got a standard solution as well as an analyte. So the difference between these two is that in a standard solution, a standard solution is a solution of precisely known concentration. So this is a solution whereby you know what is its molar concentration. Remember that the molar concentration just tells you how many number of moles are you having per unit volume. So in this case, if you know what is that value in molar, then you can be able to say that you can refer to that as a standard solution. But if it happens that I've got another sample, let me just say I give you a sample, this sample here, maybe this is a sample of sodium hydroxide. So I know that the composition of the sample, it is sodium hydroxide, but I do not know what is its concentration or what is its molar concentration. Then I will call that as an analyte. So the analyte, it is the solution which you don't know its concentration, or it's a solution that you don't know its molar concentration. So whenever we are dealing with acid-base titrations, you must know that a standard solution, it can be either a base or it can be an acid. But as long as you know the concentration of that particular solution, then you can say it's a standard solution, whether it's a base or an acid. Even an analyte, or maybe the analyte, which is the solution that you don't know its concentration, it can also be a base and it can also be an acid as well. So it depends on which solution do you know its concentration. So in this case, the standard solution, you definitely know its concentration, its molar concentration, but for the analyte, you do not know its molar concentration. That is just the difference. So usually when we carry out titrations, so that we can try and determine the concentration of the analyte. Since we do not know what is the concentration of the analyte, we can determine it by using a titration. So a titration, usually I'm sure you've already done this in the lab, whereby you just take a burette, and then in the burette you usually fill the burette with your titrant. So the titrant is the standard solution, which is the solution of known concentration. So the solution that you know its concentration, or the solution whose concentration you know, you actually fill it up inside a burette. And then the solution that you don't know its concentration, or maybe the solution whose concentration you don't know, you put it inside an Erlenmeyer flask. You just put it inside an Erlenmeyer flask. So our standard solution will actually be filled inside the burette, whereas our analyte will be filled inside the Erlenmeyer flask, the one that we're analyzing. Because the whole point of a titration, it is to try and find out how much concentration does this analyte has. We're actually trying to determine the concentration of the analyte. So that's why we actually put the analyte inside an Erlenmeyer flask, and then we titrate it by using a known amount or a known volume of a titrant. So the titrant, in this case, the standard solution, you can also give it another name, and you can say it is the titrant. Whenever you are carrying out a titration, the standard solution, it is a titrant. And then the analyte, which is the solution of unknown concentration, you say it is known as the analyte. So we've got an analyte and a titrant, those two. Okay, so how does a titration actually work? Remember that whenever you are titrating, first of all, you need to add the titrant, which is the standard solution, into a burette. You fill the burette with the standard solution whose concentration you know. And then whenever you start opening your burette here, whenever you open your burette lid, this tap like thing, this acid, or let me just say this standard solution will start pouring out from the burette. And when this standard solution pours out from the burette and goes into the Erlenmeyer flask, which contains the analyte, then there's going to be a chemical reaction between the two, because the analyte and the standard solutions, they are usually acids and bases. Whenever we're doing acid-base titration, one of them is an acid, another one is a base. So they have got a reaction. So basically, the standard solution that is inside the burette will react to the analyte, and then that will happen in the flask. So this reaction continues until we reach a certain point known as an equivalent point. So the equivalence point, it is a point whereby the number of moles of the acid are equal to the number of moles of the base, okay? Or we can just say this is the point where the number of moles of the titrant are equal to the number of moles of the analyte, or you can say of the, whereby the point whereby the number of moles of the standard solution is equal to the number of moles of the unknown solution, which is the analyte. So for example, if we are going to take a reaction, maybe a reaction of hydrochloric acid, and then we are going to react it with sodium hydroxide. This is an acid reacted with a base. So let me just assume that your sodium hydroxide is your standard solution. So let's just assume that you already know the concentration of sodium hydroxide. So you know the molarity or the molar concentration of sodium hydroxide, but you do not know what is the molarity of the HCl. You don't know what is the molar concentration of the hydrochloric acid. So when these two react with one another, they are definitely going to form some products. The product that is formed when you react an acid and a base, it is a salt and water. So we already know that we are going to get a sodium chloride as the salt here, and then this is going to be plus H2O. Okay, so now since these are sharing a 1:1 ratio, if you look carefully, you can realize that here the hydrochloric acid and the sodium hydroxide, they've got a 1:1 ratio. So it means that 1 mole of hydrochloric acid reacts exactly with 1 mole of sodium hydroxide. So when we start the titration, we assume that the number of moles of the hydrochloric acid and the sodium hydroxide, they are not the same, they are not equal. But due to the titration and due to this reaction that is happening, they will end up becoming equal to one another. So the equivalence point, it is the point whereby the number of moles of the acid is equal to the number of moles of the base, or you can say that it is a point whereby the number of moles of the titrant or the standard solution is equal to the number of moles of the unknown solution or the analyte. So here you would say that this is the number of moles of the acid is equals to the number of moles of the base. And you already know that the number of moles can be expressed as the molar concentration times the volume. So you can just say that this is the molar concentration of the acid multiplied by the volume of the acid that is added. This must be equals to the molar concentration of the base times the volume of the base added. So basically this is actually this formula actually works to find the equivalence point, because this is a 1:1 ratio. We are still going to do more examples whereby you are going to have different case scenarios, but basically this is the equivalence point formula that we use whenever we are reacting an acid and a base in a 1:1 ratio. Okay, so at the equivalent points, what do we need to know? At the equivalent points, the amount of the titrant that has been added, it is actually chemically equivalent to the analyte. So remember that initially, before we begin our titration, we start with an analyte inside the flask. The analyte has got its known number of moles. It has got a certain number of moles. Let's just say it has got a certain number of moles. All right, and we don't know it actually. We don't know the number of moles. We don't know the volume. We don't know the concentration. That is the analyte. So initially, we definitely are sure that inside the flask we have got an analyte, and we don't know its values for number of moles and concentration. But the moment you start opening your burette, the burette will start pouring out drops of this standard solution, and these drops will start reacting with the what? With the analyte. After the reaction starts happening, you will know that at some point the number of moles of the standard solution that have been added, or the number of moles of the titrant that have been added, will start being equal to the number of moles that are present here of the analyte. We don't know the number of moles of the analyte that are present, but they will actually end up becoming equal to one another. So basically, at the equivalence points, the amount of the titrant added is actually chemically equivalent to the analyte. It simply means that here, the number of moles of the titrant that is being added, or the number of moles of the standard solution that is being added, is now equal to the number of moles that was present the number of moles of the analyte that was present. So hence we have this formula for the equivalence point. Okay, so now after understanding what the equivalence point is, we can now start and look at the whole point of a titration. A titration is carried out in order to determine the concentration of the analyte by adding a known volume of the titrant or of the standard solution. So that's exactly what I've explained already, that the whole purpose of a titration, it is to try and find out how much is the analyte concentrated, what is the concentration, what is the molar concentration of the analyte. And we use a standard solution, or we use a titrant, and the titrant has a known concentration, and we add a known volume. Right now, when we are carrying out this titration, we try and use some indicators to be able to observe that we have reached the equivalence point. The moment our indicators tell us that we have reached the equivalence point, it means that we have added enough acid for this whole reaction to reach equivalence point. And now we can be able to now use that volume of the acid that we've added, multiplied by its known concentration, the concentration that we know, and then equate it to the other side and try to solve the other remaining things. So that is the whole point of carrying out a titration. So now let's look at the standard solution and its specifications. The standard solutions are always strong acids, or they are strong bases. We do not use weak acids and weak bases for creating or for making our standard solutions. All right, why is that? Basically, when we look at the strong species, which are the strong acids or the strong bases, remember that I've already said that the standard solution, it does not always have to be an acid, and it does not always have to be a base. But a standard solution, it is just a solution whose concentration you know, or maybe a solution that has got a known concentration. Okay, it can either be an acid or a base. So whatever it is, it must be strong. So that strong acid or base, or that strong species, it reacts completely in water. We already know that according to the Arrhenius definition of an acid is a substance that releases hydronium ions in water, and then a base releases hydroxide ions in water. So basically, the stronger acids and the stronger bases, what makes them different from the weaker ones? The stronger acids, they ionize completely in water. Okay, they ionize completely in water so that they can release a greater concentration of hydronium ions. So having a strong acid or a strong base, we know that all of them, they react completely in water, or they dissociate completely, or they separate, their ions separate completely in water. And this actually makes them to easily react more thoroughly with the analyte than the weak acids or the weak bases. Because if you're going to make your standard solution a weak acid, we know that the weak acid will not be able to dissociate completely in water. So for example, if we take hydrochloric acid, for example, hydrochloric acid, we know that this one is a strong acid, and then the moment we dissolve it in water to make our standard solution, we find out that it is going to form hydronium ions. That is going to be H3O plus, because it donates the proton to the water, and then is also going to form Cl minus ions. When you look at the hydronium ions here, according to the rules, since the HCl dissociates or it ionizes completely, we already know that the amount or the concentration of the H3O plus ions, it is definitely going to be the same as the concentration of the HCl. Okay, so the equilibrium concentration of the H3O plus ions is going to be the same as the concentration of the HCl. Why is this possible? It's because this HCl, it completely dissociates so that it can be able to form this H3O plus. So if we know that maybe the concentration of HCl, it was 0.2 molar, then it means that the concentration of the hydronium ions, or the concentration of the H3O plus ions that are formed, is also going to be 0.2 molar as well, because this is a strong acid. It dissociates or it ionizes completely in water. So it means that this H3O plus, there will be a lot of H3O plus ions and they will be available to be able to react with the analyte. Compared to a weak acid, if you're going to use a weak acid rather, maybe you take acetic acid. Acetic acid given by the formula CH3COOH. So if you take ethanoic acid or if you take acetic acid and then maybe you are going to react it with water or you dissolve it inside water to form the standard solution, you only find out that in your reversible reaction, yes, you can form you are going to form your CH3COO minus ion plus your H2O, H3O plus, I mean. So here, the difference between a weak acid and a strong acid is that when you react the weak acid with water, or when you try to dissolve the weak acid into water, the amount of hydronium ions that are formed, it is going to be what? It is going to be less than the initial acid's concentration. So basically, when you look at the concentration of the hydronium ions here, the concentration of the H3O plus ions that are released by this weak acid, it is never going to be equal to the molar concentration of the acid that we used. So it simply means, in this is just a mathematical way of showing that whenever you are having a weak acid, the weak acid does not ionize completely. It simply means that it does not completely convert to H3O plus. It does not completely give away all its its protons. Okay, so in that way, we are trying to say that for a weak acid, it's not going to make a good standard solution. And also a weak base is not going to make a good standard solution, because the weak species, they react, they ionize partially. They do not ionize completely. Maybe it only ionizes 76%. It means that a whole 24% will just remain as the acid itself. It will not be able to separate to form these H3O plus ions and these acetate ions. So that is the idea. So strong species, they react with water completely, and this actually makes them to react better with the analyte. Hence, they are preferable for them to be standard solutions. And then the completion, since we say that here, these strong species, they react more completely in water compared to the weak species. This completion of the reaction actually leads to a sharper equivalence point on a titration curve, and this makes it easier to visualize or instrumentally determine the endpoint. So we have got titration curves that we use to be able to try and determine our endpoint. So the endpoint is different from the equivalence point a bit, because the endpoint is actually the point where the indicator changes color. So it is the point where the indicator changes color. So when we plot a titration curve has got a pH on the y-axis and has got the volume on the x-axis. This is the volume of the standard solution that has been added to the analyte from the burette, of course. So when we look at using a standard solution that is strong, or a strong acid or a strong base as a standard solution, it makes it easier, because when you look at the equivalence point, it has got this sharp curve here, this sharp curve. So this sharp equivalence point actually makes it easier for us to be able to determine the actual endpoint of that particular indicator. So for example, if you're using phenolphthalein, you know that phenolphthalein, it turns purple when it reaches the endpoint, right? Or when you are using a methyl orange, you know that it turns orange when it is using what? When it reaches the endpoint, its endpoint. So it is easier to determine either visually or instrumentally. But when you're going to use a weak species, or maybe you use weak acids or weak bases to be able to make your standard solution, then you are going to see that your titration curve is not going to have a sharp point here. It's not going to have a sharp point or a sharp equivalence point. So this actually makes it harder for us to be able to actually determine the endpoint, or actually visualize the endpoint as well. So it is hard to visually or instrumentally detect that endpoint of a titration whose standard solution is a weak acid or a weak base. Hence, it is preferable for us to only use standard solutions which are strong species, that is strong acids and strong bases, for these reasons. Now, How do you prepare a standard solution in the lab? To be able to prepare the standard solution in the lab, you need to use a concentrated acid. So you take a concentrated acid or a concentrated base. And remember, the standard solution can either be an acid or it can be a base. So if you take a concentrated acid, such as a hydrochloric acid, such as sulfuric acid or perchloric acid, these ones are the commonly used ones, and they are strong acids. All of them, they are strong acids. Remember that we have already said that we are using strong acids for making standard solutions. So you just take that concentrated acid. It can either be HCl, it can be H2SO4, or it can be perchloric acid as well. And then you dilute that concentrated acid. You need to dilute it because you are forming a solution, right? When you're forming a solution, you need a solute and a solvent. So when you're forming this standard solution, you need the dilution. You need a solvent, which is going to be water. So you just use distilled water, and then you mix it with you pour in your acid, your concentrated acid, you dilute it. That's where you have formed a standard solution. It's very simple to do. You just use your volumetric flask, and then you pour in some distilled water, and then you just mix and mix and mix. You have already formed that standard solution. And that solution, you will know its concentration because you know how much volume you added, and you know all the other parts. Okay, so the nitric acid is also one of the acids, but it's not usually used because it has got its oxidizing properties. So nitric acid is a good oxidizer. So if we try to make a standard solution out of nitric acid, it is going to lead to undesirable side reactions because it's a strong oxidizer. So if nitric acid is a strong oxidizer because it has got a lot of oxygen, then it means that it can end up forming other reactions whenever you dissolve it in water, or whenever you are diluting it in water to be able to form your standard solutions. So those oxidizing properties that are exhibited by nitric acid, they actually make it very difficult for us to use it as a standard solution. Although it's a strong acid, but you cannot really use it as a standard solution because we might actually encounter quite a couple of side reactions that we do not desire. And then if you want to use a base to be able to make your standard solution, then you usually extract that OH from a base such as sodium hydroxide, or such as KOH or barium hydroxide. All of these are strong bases, by the way. You are not going to use ammonia to form a standard solution. You don't use ammonia to form a standard solution because you would know that the ammonia is a weak species. It does not dissociate completely in water. Therefore, it will not be able to react completely with the analyte. Okay, so now one thing that we need to also look at are the indicators. So when we look at indicators such as phenolphthalein and your bromothymol blue are simply weak organic acids. So actually indicators, they are also organic acids and they are also organic bases, but these ones are weak. So remember that we said for a standard solution, we use strong acids or bases, but for an indicator, we use weak acids or weak bases. So you need to understand which one is which. So for the standard solution, or for our titrant, we use strong acids or bases. Those are strong species because of the reasons that I've already explained to you guys. Okay, but for an indicator, indicators are usually weak organic acids. They just exist in nature. They are weak organic acids, and their color changes when they gain or they lose a proton. The most important feature that we like about indicators is that they change color. They change color when they gain or they lose a proton. So if we are using an indicator that is an acid, that is a weak organic acid, it is going to lose a proton. But if we are going to use an indicator that is a weak organic base, it is going to gain a proton. So whenever they gain or lose a proton, what do? They change color. So they are the ones that actually detect the endpoint, if the endpoint has been reached or not. Basically, the endpoint, when we define it, it is the point where the indicator starts to change color. Okay, and we can try to use the endpoint to try and find the equivalence point from then. because the endpoint and the equivalence point, they are two distinct terms. But when you look at them, the equivalence point, remember we said that it is the point whereby the number of moles of the acid or of the titrant is equal to the number of moles of the base or of the analyte. Okay, so basically we use those indicators to detect that endpoint has been reached. So we need to use them to detect if endpoint has been reached or not. So for an acid type of indicator, we can have this reaction. So this reaction, you can see that this is a weak organic acid. Our indicator is a weak organic acid. How do we see that? We see that it has got a proton here, this H here. So this IN is just saying indicator. There's nothing much about it. So this IN is just for an indicator. So this H tells you that there's a proton in the indicator. So that is a what? That is a weak organic acid indicator. So the indicator in this case is a weak organic acid. All right, weak organic acid. And then now when it is dissolved inside water, or when it is in solution, it actually dissociates, of course, and this hydrogen will actually be given or donated to the water, and it will form H3O plus ions, and then it will form a conjugate base, and that conjugate base will have a specific color. So basically, what is the color change that is happening here? It first starts with an initial color or an acid color. For example, if you take phenolphthalein, phenolphthalein starts as a colorless indicator. So it starts as a what? As a colorless indicator. It's a weak organic reagent as well. It's a colorless indicator. That is its acidic color. But the moment you put it inside water, and then it happens that you start titrating, and it happens to lose a proton during the end point, then it is going to form a conjugate base which will have a different color. That is why indicators are used to be able to detect the endpoint, because they are the ones that tell us that now the number of moles of the titrant are now equal to the number of moles of the analyte. Okay, and then when the solution is highly acidic, so if it happens that your solution is highly acidic, it means that we have got an excess amount of hydronium ions. So if we are going to use a solution that is having an excess amount of hydronium ions, this reaction's equilibrium will actually shift to the left, because remember that when we increase the hydronium ions here, this is the product, right? So when you increase the number of products according to the Le Chatelier's principle, increasing the concentration of the product will drive the reaction to actually shift towards the reverse reaction. So the equilibrium is shifting towards the left, and then what will happen? This will actually force the indicator to actually go back to its acidic form, and then this will show an acid color of the indicator, the acid color version of the indicator. But when the solution is highly basic, so when the solution is highly basic, let's just say you are using a basic solution as your analyte, and you pour in drops of your indicator, then what will happen? We'll know that the hydroxide ions from this basic solution will actually neutralize the hydronium ions, and this will shift the equilibrium to the right. The opposite will be true in that way. Okay, and where this will force the indicator to actually show its base color. So this is just explaining the mechanism in which the acid and the base, in which the indicator changes color. But the whole point is here, whenever we're having an indicator, it can change color. And when does it change color? It changes color when it gains or when it loses a proton. It can only gain or lose a proton when it reaches the end point, because at the end point we know that at least equivalence point has already been reached. The number of moles of the acid are already equal to the number of moles of the base. So whatever amount of titrant that you keep on adding, it is going to react to the indicator itself. It's going to either give the indicator some protons, or it's going to take away some protons from the indicator. And whenever an indicator or a weak organic acid or a weak organic base, aka your indicator, whenever it gains or loses a proton, it will change color, and that color change is an observable phenomena. Okay, we can observe it using our human eye.